I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson, but we don't accept VA housing vouchers here. Company policy. We require a standard credit check and first and last month's rent in certified funds, the rental agent said, her tone crisp and dismissive as she pushed Thomas Henderson's application back across the polished desk. Thomas, 72, a widower and Army veteran, clutched the voucher, a lifeline to stable, affordable housing. But this voucher is federally guaranteed. It's effectively certified funds. And it's meant for veterans who've served, he replied. The agent simply shook her head. Policy is policy. We have other applicants. 8 minutes later, as Thomas sat dejectedly on a bus bench outside, the serene atmosphere of the Luxury Pines Apartments leasing office shattered with the arrival of a no-nonsense judge, accompanied by uniformed military police and wielding a court order. Thomas Henderson understood bureaucracy, but he had always believed in fairness. After his wife's passing, the big house felt empty and too costly to maintain on his modest Army pension and disability benefits. Downsizing seemed logical. He sought a small, accessible apartment. The VA's Housing Choice Voucher Program, commonly called VASH, was designed for veterans like him, offering rental assistance to honorably discharged service members. After months on a wait list and a mountain of paperwork, he had finally received his voucher. A golden ticket, he thought, to a safe, dignified place to live out his years. Luxury Pines Apartments, despite the slightly pretentious name, seemed ideal. A modern complex, well-maintained, with several ground-floor units available, and notably, listed on the VA's recommended housing list for voucher holders in the region. Thomas had completed the application meticulously. He attached his military records, honorable discharge papers, and the official VA housing voucher that guaranteed a substantial portion of rent would be paid directly to the landlord. Wanting to make a good impression, he dressed in clean slacks, a pressed shirt, and a neat sports coat before heading to his appointment with the leasing agent, Ms. Janice Albright. He felt cautiously optimistic. All he needed was a quiet, safe place to call home. The leasing office at Luxury Pines reflected aspirational marketing, plush carpets, abstract art, soft background music, and glossy brochures of smiling, affluent residents. Ms. Albright, in her late 40s, impeccably dressed, greeted Thomas with a polished smile and cool, appraising eyes. She offered him a seat at her large mahogany desk. Thomas presented his paperwork and voucher. Good morning, Ms. Albright. I'm Thomas Henderson. I have an appointment about a one-bedroom unit, and I'll be using a VA housing voucher. Her smile tightened ever so slightly as she took the documents. She glanced at the voucher, then typed something into her computer. Her demeanor cooled. Mr. Henderson, she began, the warmth in her voice fading. While we appreciate your interest in Luxury Pines, I'm afraid our corporate policy prohibits acceptance of third-party housing vouchers, including VA vouchers. Thomas was stunned. But your property is listed on the VA's approved list for this area. The voucher is a federal guarantee. It's designed to help veterans secure housing. I understand that, sir, she replied, though her tone made clear she didn't. However, our corporate ownership enforces specific tenancy requirements. We require applicants to pass our standard credit and income checks independently. All payments must come directly from tenants via verified personal funds. We don't engage with programs involving direct government payments or external agency oversight. She slid the voucher and application back toward him, a clear gesture of dismissal. It's just our policy. It ensures a certain caliber of resident. The implication hit hard. Veterans with vouchers weren't the caliber they wanted. Thomas felt a familiar cold anger. Years of service had taught him to contain it. Ms. Albright, he said, his voice steady but firm. Refusing a VA housing voucher from a qualified veteran can be considered discrimination under the Fair Housing Act, especially when your property is listed as participating. This voucher is a promise made to those who served. She bristled, the mask slipping. Sir, I'm not here to debate federal law. I'm informing you of our company's rental policy. We are a private property and have the right to set our own tenancy criteria. If you cannot meet those without the voucher, we have no available units for you. She stood, signaling the end. We have a list of qualified applicants. I suggest you explore other housing options better suited to your situation. The casual cruelty, the dismissal of service, the bureaucratic deflection, it all formed a bitter cocktail of disrespect. Arguing would be useless. He was just one veteran versus a system built to exclude. Thomas gathered his papers slowly, his hand trembling, not with fear, but suppressed rage and disappointment. This was about more than housing. It was about dignity and a promise made and broken. Thank you for your time, Ms. Albright, he said, voice tight. He turned, walked out, and found a bus bench along the busy street. The hum of traffic clashed with the turmoil in his chest. This couldn't be the end. He reached for his phone. He had one last contact, a nuclear option. He dialed the private number of a retired Judge Advocate General, Judge Esther Carmichael, now head of a pro bono legal foundation for veterans facing housing discrimination. A woman legendary for her fierce advocacy and zero tolerance for injustice. She answered on the second ring. Carmichael. Judge Carmichael, ma'am, it's Thomas Henderson, Sergeant Major, retired. We met at the VFW conference last spring. Henderson, good to hear from you, though I suspect this isn't a social call. No, ma'am, he said, then relayed everything. Luxury Pines, the voucher, Ms. Albright's refusal, her policy language, and the fair housing implications. She listened, asking sharp questions for clarification. When he finished, there was a moment of steel-edged silence. Luxury Pines Apartments? Owned by Sterling Real Estate Holdings? Yes, ma'am. That's what the sign says. And Ms. Albright stated, explicitly, they don't accept VA vouchers as policy? Her exact words, ma'am. I see, Judge Carmichael said, her tone chilling. Henderson, are you still nearby? Yes, ma'am, on a bench outside the main entrance. Don't move. Sterling Holdings has been on our watch list for months. This may be the test case we need. I'm currently at the federal courthouse. Let's see how their policy holds up against a federal order and 2 U.S. Marshals. Sit tight. 8 minutes. The line went dead. Thomas stared at his phone, adrenaline surging. Judge Carmichael didn't bluff. He had a feeling Ms. Albright's orderly day was about to get interesting. 5 minutes passed, then 6, 7. Exactly 8 minutes after the call, traffic outside Luxury Pines ground to a halt, not from a single car, but a convoy of black sedans with government plates, flanked by U.S. Marshals vehicles, lights flashing. They pulled into the leasing office's drive. Out stepped Judge Esther Carmichael. No robes, but a dark suit exuding authority. 2 stern-faced U.S. Marshals followed, along with 2 briefcase-carrying lawyers from her foundation. Miss Albright, mid-tour with another potential tenant, looked up, irritated, then froze as she recognized the insignias and the formidable woman striding toward her. Janice Albright? Judge Carmichael asked, voice cutting through the room like a gavel. Ms. Albright, pale, nodded. I'm Judge Esther Carmichael, retired, representing the Veterans Legal Justice Foundation. These are Deputy U.S. Marshals. We are here under an emergency ex parte order from the United States District Court. She produced a folder with a federal seal. This order compels Sterling Real Estate Holdings and this Luxury Pines property to cease discriminatory rental practices, specifically the blanket denial of federally guaranteed VA housing vouchers. It mandates full access to all applications, internal communications, and tenancy records from the past 24 months for federal audit prospective tenants stared. Staff froze. Furthermore, she continued, you are to immediately process Mr. Thomas Henderson's valid application and VA voucher for the next available and suitable one-bedroom unit, without prejudice or additional requirements not applied to non-voucher applicants. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges and substantial federal penalties. Ms. Albright looked faint. She mumbled about policy and legal teams. Your company policy, Judge Carmichael said, does not override federal law. Your legal team has been notified. I believe your CEO is being advised to cooperate. She gestured to her associates. They will begin the review. The marshals will ensure your full cooperation. The officers positioned themselves near the exits. Judge Carmichael turned to Thomas, who had been quietly escorted in. Sergeant Major Henderson, she said, her tone warm now. Please come with me. It seems Ms. Albright will be assisting you personally, and as it happens, a newly renovated ground floor one-bedroom just became available. Under federal scrutiny, Ms. Albright's earlier policies vanished. Within the hour, Thomas had a signed lease, his VA voucher fully accepted, first month's prorated rent covered, application fees waived, and administrative error, Albright claimed weakly. Meanwhile, auditors from Judge Carmichael's team set up in the back office, beginning a long and thorough inspection of Luxury Pines' rental records. As she walked Thomas to view his new apartment, she said, Sometimes, Thomas, these companies need a strong reminder. Our laws protecting veterans aren't optional. They are mandates, and some of us are still here to make sure they're enforced. With the keys to his new home in hand, Thomas smiled. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. No luxury amenity could match that. Thank you, Judge, he said. Thank you for still fighting the good fight. The fallout for Sterling Real Estate Holdings was significant. The federal audit exposed widespread discriminatory practices against voucher holders. They faced steep fines, a consent decree, mandated policy changes nationwide, and compulsory fair housing training, supervised by Judge Carmichael's foundation. Ms. Albright was reassigned to a corporate records role, no longer client-facing. Her career in leasing effectively ended. Thomas moved into his quiet, safe, accessible apartment at Luxury Pines. He became a respected, if modest, figure in the community. Other veterans heard of the case and found their own paths to housing a little easier. Judge Carmichael's foundation used the case to launch a wider initiative targeting housing discrimination against veterans. Thomas occasionally had coffee with the judge, his quiet dignity a constant reminder of why she fought so hard. He never sought recognition, but one phone call had triggered a wave of accountability. Because a voucher isn't just a piece of paper, it's a promise, one backed by law, and by those who refuse to let veterans be forgotten. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks if you believe every veteran deserves a safe place to call home, and that corporate policy should never outweigh honor and federal law.